Welcome to Ask Tom for July. I'm Russ Lowenthal, Product Manager for Database Security, and today we're going to be talking about separation of duties. Just a quick reminder, this call is being recorded and it is an open call. So as we have people join, you should assume your competition is listening. Don't discuss proprietary information during the call. Ask Tom's intended to provide a direct channel into Oracle Database Security product development. It gives you a forum where you can connect directly with us. Each month we hold 2 sessions. We've hopefully timed them so that you can catch one of them during your normal day. The sessions have identical content. We'll start with product announcements for the month, follow on with a short technical presentation, and then finish up with the Q&A portion of the session. Please feel to ask your questions at any time via chat. When we get to the Q&A section, I'll cover the chat questions first and then unmute everybody for any other questions. Do remember, again, this is an open forum. If you've got a question that you need to ask privately, I'll have my email address up on screen during the Q&A segment, and you're welcome to just email me with the question. Okay? For database security announcements, it is going to be an exciting month for us. We're looking forward to the release of 18C on-premises next week. You may be aware that that's available now in the cloud. It's also available for Exadata on-premises, but the generic, you can go out and download it and install it in a VM on any server you want to work with. That is next week. You can look for it on edelivery.oracle.com. New features, security features that we've got in 18C. There's centrally managed users, which is really a awaited update to enterprise user security that allows direct connection of the database to Microsoft Active Directory. We have passwordless schemas, which what it means is a schema with no password, no ability to log in. And what that lets you do is it lets you have schemas that are true object containers with no security risk of them ever logging in. Another really great enhancement. We've done some changes to database vault simulation mode. You may remember that we introduced this back in Oracle 12, and in 18 we've continued to improve simulation mode, learning some of the things that we've learned since we introduced it. And we've made some modifications to the unified audit trail, including the ability to export it and to write your audit trail to syslog. This is just a fraction of what we've done in 18C. We'll talk a lot more about this next month after it's out the door. But there's one other thing I want to make sure and let you know about, and that is this is our first new version of Express Edition in, I believe, 6 years. So the current version of Oracle XE is 11G. We completely skipped the 12.1 and 12.2 timeframe. XE has been updated for 18C, and sometime either next week or the week after, you should see Oracle XE available for download. There's also a change to the packaging in XE. It's going to include now Advanced Security, Database Vault, and Label Security. And if you've worked with the 11G version of XE, it did not include those security options. The 18C version will. Also coming this month, hopefully this week or next week, you will see Bundle Patch 7 for Key Vault released. There's a lot of new stuff in Bundle Patch 7, but 3 of the bigger things are we're going to add support in for endpoints running on AIX 5.3. We've had several requests for that. We're also adding in support for installation of Key Vault on servers that only do UEFI boot. You may remember from last month's call that we added in UEFI boot to Audit Vault and Database Firewall with Bundle Patch 8 of AVDF. We're doing the same for Key Vault with Bundle Patch 7. But the really big change, the one that is just an amazing thing to have, is in Bundle Patch 7, we now give you the ability to manage your endpoint configuration from a central console. Prior to Bundle Patch 7, if you had 1,000 databases or database servers and you had installed 1,000 endpoints for Key Vault, each one of those endpoints had its own configuration file. And if you wanted to make configuration changes like changing timeout for cache or something, you had to open up a session to that server and go to the configuration file and manually edit it and hope you didn't make a mistake. And you had to repeat that 1,000 different times. Now with Bundle Patch 7, you're going to see a couple of new screens that allow you to make these changes directly from the Key Vault console. Much, much better for large deployments. We're really happy to get this new functionality. And again, you can look forward to seeing that sometime this month. Going back to last month, we did get Database Security Assessment Tool version 202 out, and we've already talked about that, but just to let you know that it is finally out the door. New this month is regulation for North America. It is the first time that we've seen GDPR type legislation in North America that establishes a Bill of Rights, if you will, for consumers, and that was passed in California at the end of June. It becomes effective the 1st of January in 2020, and we've talked several times on AskTOM about the trend towards more legislation globally around data security. I'm sad to say that if you'd asked me this, or when I was asked this question back in May, was America ever going to have a GDPR type legislation? I said no. Well, just a few months later, I'm proved wrong, and sure enough, we do have one. We'll have to see whether this spreads, but we can look forward to seeing that. We've got a couple of new support notes out. One of those is a great note for anyone who is using Audit Vault and Database Firewall, especially if you are using Audit Vault and Firewall to collect before and after values in your audit trail. And we're doing this today using streams and redo log mining. Well, we've got a new support note that walks you through how to diagnose, troubleshoot, and recover from issues with that collection. And this would be, I'm missing an archive log, or I've got maybe a transaction that went into redo that for some reason the agent can't parse. This gets us through that. Another one that's important for any of us that are using transport layer security for encrypting data in motion. So not if you're using native network encryption, but if you're using TLS, is a new note that walks you through some of the TLS protocol options that are available, and it includes an updated micro encryption suite roadmap. And for this section, I want to bring in a guest speaker. We're going to have in Ravi Handyal come on just a second here. I'm going to turn it over to Ravi, and he's going to walk us through what is in this new note and how that is going to make our lives just a little bit better. Ravi, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Russ. Appreciate it. So this particular note has been out for a few weeks now. This basically explains how TLS 1.2 support is incorporated into the different versions of the database. Fundamentally, this particular protocol is used for, it's a part of the Oracle Security Services layer, which provides the SSL, TLS, crypto services, PKI, fixed compliance to all the Oracle products, database, middleware, EM, etc. Each of these products suites have been taking up, the MES versions, the enhanced versions of MES libraries. They all initially came out with MES 401 as these were released, and MES 401 didn't have TLS support. It just had SSL. So as SSL gets deprecated and TLS 1.2 becomes the norm, the database as well as all the clients are getting upgraded to the MES 405, 415 roadmap. 405 MES library delivered by RSA is actually now deprecated. Sorry. But it was getting into the plan and get the TLS 1.2 support. However, we are upgrading those libraries to MES 415 that allows for FIPS certification as well. So the DB 11.204, 12.102, and 12.202 versions have been updated to get the MES 415 libraries, and the roadmap for that is 11.204 is the last on the string here. But it's the most popular database, if you will, for customers who have been running this technology and using TLS 1.2. So starting this, 12.202 had already got the MES 415 libraries in it. So we are good there. This will eventually, sometime next year, get upgraded to a new version of the library, we will have to wait for RSA to provide that. But in 12.102, the default was MES 405 that already supported TLS 1.2. But in in July 2018 PSU, we will be including the MES 415 version, which provides us the FIPS certification. And then for 11.204, we currently are providing MES 415 overlays. The target is to include MES 415 into October 2018 PSU, and all the MES 405 overlays are deprecated. So we strongly encourage everybody to move to just the MES 415 overlays, and obviously when MES 415 comes out into PSU, it gets used by everyone. And this particular note here gives all the details about the bug numbers to use for downloading the patch on MES on 11.204.
Thanks, Ravi. And if I'm understanding this correctly, with the July PSU, we'll no longer need a separate merge patch to upgrade the MES. It's now just included. Is that correct?
That is for 12.102.
Okay. And then in October, once we have that included, will we no longer need a separate merge patch for 11.2?
That's correct. 11.2.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. That's great news.
That's the current target.
And as with any target, there's always a chance it will slip. But for those that have been fighting that battle of every time you get a new PSU having to get a merge patch, I think this is going to be a really fantastic thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. It streamlines a lot of things, but since this is almost a new feature, we have had challenges. So
Right.
I'll stop at that. But clearly, this is a step in the right direction.
Fantastic news. Thanks, Ravi. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's continue on a little bit. Let's move on. Today's topic for technical is separation of duties. Separation of duties is the concept of having multiple people split up a task so that each person has a piece of the task, and it requires two people to do something bad, if you will. And we normally think of separation of duties, or we originally think of separation of duties in terms of things like accounting. The classic example for separation of duties is you wouldn't want someone to be able to both cut a purchase order and pay the purchase order, because then they could just give themselves money. And so in accounting, the idea of separation of duties is used to prevent fraud. In database world, we generally use separation of duties for two reasons. One is to prevent error. It's very common to have a person who has some administrative function in the database, and their privileges are limited to doing only that administrative function, so they don't accidentally do something silly, like a junior DBA typing in drop database is a great example. The other reason we have separation of duties has to do with the way databases most commonly get hacked. The most common way that a database is breached is through the use of stolen or guessed logon credentials. And if I'm a bad guy and I get Johnny's password and I log into the database as Johnny, and Johnny has every privilege in the database, I can do a lot of damage. And we're able to reduce our risk of someone getting Johnny's password by shrinking what Johnny can do to only the things Johnny needs to do for his or her job. And that's where separation of duties comes in. Now, I've divided separation of duties up into two different areas for this call. The first thing we're going to hit is basic separation of duties. And by basic separation of duties, I'm talking about the stuff that comes with the database. You don't need database vault. You don't need advanced security. We're talking about the stuff everybody has to work with. Let's start way, way back in time at the beginning with the difference between SYSDBA and DBA. So SYSDBA is an administrative privilege. It's not a role. It's a privilege. DBA is a database role, and the DBA role can be granted to any database user. And a user who logs in as DBA is still that user. So if I'm Russ and I log in to the database and I have the DBA role, when I say show user, I'll be Russ. SYSDBA, an administrative privilege, maps to an administrative schema. If I log into the database as SYSDBA, regardless of who I actually am, what username I gave in the login, when I say show user, I'll see that my schema, my connected schema, is Sys. Now, typically, you'll have SYSDBA mapped to an operating system group. The most common one that we're used to is in a Unix or Linux environment. SYSDBA is tied to the DBA group. If we're on Windows, it'll be Aura DBA. Depending on how I've got the database configured, we may or may not allow remote connections as SYSDBA. In order to allow remote connections as SYSDBA, you have to have a password file because the password for SYSDBA is in the password file. And so I would have to set remote login password file to either exclusive or shared. Now here's where it gets to be a little tricky. When we created the SYSDBA privilege, we didn't want it used for day-to-day DBA opportunities. Logging in as SYSDBA is like logging onto a server as root. You should almost never do that unless you actually have to do something that SYSDBA needs to do. And the only thing SYSDBA needs to do is upgrade the database, patch the database. You don't use SYSDBA, or you shouldn't be using SYSDBA for day-to-day stuff. For normal DBA activities, you should be logging in as a named user with the DBA role or a role that has only the privileges you need. So for separation of duties, you want to make sure that people don't log in as SYSDBA and preferably can't log in as SYSDBA. Just a little bit more on SYSDBA. I'd mentioned SYSDBA relies on OS group membership. There's a lot of people that think that SYSDBA is something I get because I'm Oracle on the server. I'm the database owner. Not the case, and I can show you that right here. If you'll look, you'll see that I'm the Oracle user over in the SSH window, and the groups I belong to include DBA. When I connect / as SYSDBA, that works because I'm a member of the DBA group. And if I say show user, it shows me that I'm Sys. That's fine. Now I'll SU to my name. I'm Russ. When I log onto the server, that's my default account because that's who I log in as Russ. Again, if I check my group membership, you'll see that I have a membership in the DBA group. When I say connect / as SYSDBA and I say show user, I'm still Sys. So connected schema for SYSDBA is always Sys. If I want to see who the actual identity is, who I truly logged in as, I can check user env, and the authenticated _ identity context shows me the actual OS username. So Sys again tied to operating system groups. What do we recommend with Sys? Again, we recommend you not log in as SYSDBA. That's for upgrades and patching. Normal activity, you do it as DBA. So that means that SYSDBA, the password should be in a privileged account management system, a check-in and check-out system. That could be Oracle Identity Manager. It could be something like a CyberArk or a Lieberman. It could be Tivoli PAM. It could be Hitachi PAM. It doesn't matter what it is, but our design goal with SYSDBA is for it not to be something that people just use casually. Okay? When you do use SYSDBA, we recommend that you have compensating controls. Those typically include audit. You may know there are some things that always get audited as SYSDBA, whether you have it turned on or not, but we like to see audit sysoperations turned on so that anything you do as SYSDBA is captured in your audit trail. It's just good security to not be using root, and if you do use root, to have a way to tell that you're using root. Okay? Now, there was a time when SYSDBA and its little brother SysOper were the only administrative privileges that existed, and that was all the way through 11G R2. Back then, it was SYSDBA was the database owner. You weren't supposed to use it much. SysOper was the database startup and shutdown account. You were supposed to use that to start and stop the database, but it had no other privileges than that. Other than those two things, everything you did was as a named DB user. Okay? Again, remember, hackers, the way that they get into a system, that's usually with stolen credentials, and SYSDBA credentials are the most valuable ones to steal. So we wanted to minimize the places where we were using this most powerful schema account, the SYS account, and we did that in 12C by creating new administrative privileges. So that, for example, if I wanted to do a backup, I didn't have to do a backup as SYSDBA. If I wanted to set up data guard, I didn't have to use SYSDBA. And over the 12C lifetime, we developed 4 new administrative roles. One of them was SYSKM, and that's for TDE key management, just like you would imagine, Sys Key Manager. Another was Sys Data Guard, another was Sys Backup. These 3 came in 12.1. SYSRAC we added in 12.2. There's a SysASM, but that was in 11.1, and that was just to manage ASM. You won't even see that in a normal database. Each of these administrative privileges has a database schema it maps to. So if I log in / a SYSKM, when I say show user, that's going to show me the SYSKM schema. If I log in / a SysBackup, that's going to show me the SysBackup schema. But again, purpose for these you can see here on the screen. Notice the bottom one, SYSRAC. I've seen a lot of people who are under the impression that SYSRAC is there to manage RAC instances. That is not the case. The reason we have SYSRAC is for the clusterware agent to use it. The idea with SYSRAC is we have this clusterware agent that's running out there as a background process. We don't want it logging in as SYSDBA, so we created this limited set of administrative privileges for SYSRAC to use, or for the RAC clusterware agent to use. Hopefully that all makes sense so far. Okay. Now, as I said, each of these SYS accounts, they're created within the database with appropriate privileges, and the passwords for these are in the password file. So the reason the password for these administrative privileges has to be in the password file is there are some operations you do while the database is down, and you can't check DBA users if the database isn't open, so the password has to be external to the database. For 19C, our plan is to change these to schema-only accounts, so there won't be any passwords for them. Now, you can always modify a user, you can alter a user if you want to lower your security, but starting with 19C, there'll be no login at all with these default accounts, and what we'll expect you to do is to grant SYSKM to ASO security user, or grant SysBackup to RMAN backup user, or whoever your names are. Okay? One other quick note, the password file, which does contain these, the credentials that you create for these accounts, these are automatically synced with DataGuard in 12.2. Those of you who were using this in 12.1 or earlier, DataGuard knew you had to manually synchronize your password files. We did get that fixed in 12.2. If you want to see what groups were assigned to the different SYS privileges, there's no view in the database that tells you this, but you can go out to Oracle Home RDBMS lib. And in RDBMS lib, you'll find a file called config.c. If you cap that file down towards the bottom of it, you will see a section where we define the different groups. And what this has done is it's taking the user input when you do your database install. So what is my DBA group, my SysOpera group, my backup group, and it'll keep it in this file. Editing this file doesn't change anything, but this is where we find what the current was that was selected during install. Okay. Real briefly, if we look at the privileges for these different administrative privileges, SYSKM, it has create session and administer key management, and it can do those whether the database is up or down. And it also has the ability, when the database is open, to look at metadata about transparent data encryption. We look at SysDG, it's a little bit more powerful than the SYSKM because you do more with DataGuard. So much like SysOpera, it can start and stop the database. It has the ability to alter a couple of things, and it has a few different database views and fixed tables that it looks at. If we look at SysBackup, that has still more privileges. In fact, SysBackup is very close to DBA. About the only thing it's lacking is the ability to select any table or update any table. So it's a very powerful role, but again, it's more limited than SYSDBA. And finally, we have SYSRAC. Remember, SYSRAC is intended for clusterware agents, not for day-to-day DBA activity. And you can get a view here of what SYSRAC will do for you. All make sense? SYSASM, again, you only see that in an ASM instance. It's for storage management, but it is for mounting groups. Anything having to do with administering ASM is done with the SYSASM privilege. If you're using DBSAT, one of the findings you might see in DBSAT is this one. And what we're looking at here is a case where the default users, SYS, has SYSDBA and SYSOPER, and there have been no named grants of these privileges. So SYSKM, SYSDG, SYSBackup, no one has granted these to anybody, which really means probably you're not using these privileges. And that is an area that should be considered as a way to improve your security. So you may want to, for example, if you are doing RMAN backups, you might want to create an account just for doing those backups rather than using SYSDBA to do a backup, because it's really more privileges than you need to do a backup. Hopefully all makes sense. Okay. Now, those are the basic things you can do, but you can take separation of duties further. And one of your big tools for taking things a little bit further is Database Vault. If you've ever looked at Database Vault, you know there's usually 3 core things that you talk about Database Vault doing. One of those, starting in 12C, is privilege analysis. And one of the great things you can do with Database Vault is you can monitor a user and see what privileges they use and remove any that they don't need. Okay, they don't need them because they're not using. Another thing you can do with Database Vault is you can set up rules that define how data is going to be accessed. You have to come from these IP addresses, running these programs during these times of day as these operating system users, and you can do that object by object, schema by schema, even command by command if you want to. But from a separation of duties standpoint, Database Vault is often used to increase your separation of duties. And there is both default out-of-the-box separation of duties built into Database Vault, and there are some things that you can manually do or do through configuration of Database Vault once you do it. For the default stuff, when you first enable Database Vault, you are going to automatically get a change to how the DBA role works. Normally, DBA can do about anything. In fact, that's what DBA stands for. It does about anything. But in a Database Vault world, DBA can't create a user. DBA can't change a user's password. DBA can't grant the connect role. That's done now using the DB Account Manager role. DBA can't create Database Vault objects and policies and realms and such. That's done by the DB admin. DBA, even SYSDBA, doesn't own Database Vault. That's done by the DB owner for the role. Even patching, which is what we want SYSDBA to be used for in a Database Vault world, relies on the DB patch admin role. So in a case where you're really trying to lock things down, you might grant SYSDBA or SYS the DB patch admin role during a maintenance period and then revoke it after that maintenance period is over. So now SYSDBA can't even do patching. So Database Vault does these separation of duty areas for us out of the box automatically. Okay. Now, there's something important in what I just said, and it's one of the very few areas where you can kind of crash land a database if you're not careful. SYSDBA can no longer change passwords. Only DB Account Manager can do that. And what that means is, if for some reason you lose the password for the Database Vault owner, your only recovery option is to do a point-in-time recovery before Database Vault was enabled. You can lose the DB admin password or the DB Account Manager password because for there, the DB owner can always just disable Database Vault and you can recover it. But if you lose the Database Vault owner password, it's kind of like if you lose the encryption key for TDE. We have no way to help you if you've lost your encryption key. Hopefully you're using Key Vault. If you lose the password for database vault owner, there's not much we're going to be able to do for you. So again, you should be controlling access to the database vault account systems, the default ones, in your PAM system. You shouldn't be logging in as the default database vault owner or the default database vault account manager. You should create named accounts that you grant those roles to. Okay. Now you can take separation of duties up a notch, still using database vault. And the place where we go up a notch here is we separate out the duty of data administration from the duty of database administration. And here what we're doing is we're taking objects, schemas, and placing them into something called a security realm, a database vault realm. And once we do that, an object that has been placed in a realm is no longer something that someone with the select any table or update any table or delete any table has any access to, because database vault supersedes those privileges. If you're using 12c, you can even create that realm as a mandatory realm, and it even applies to the schema owner. So I may own the employees table, but because I'm not a member of the realm in database vault, I may not be able to view the data in that table. So database vault lets me do that, separate out data administration from database administration. Now, let's go back to roles and let's talk briefly about the DBA role. That DBA role was great when we came up with it, which was a very, very long time ago. But today, especially in larger organizations, the DBA role is more powerful than we need to do our day-to-day work. And so a great best practice is to not use the DBA role, but to create your own administrative role that has just the privileges you need to do your job. Remember, database vault privilege analysis can help you determine what you're using and therefore what you need. So if you do have a large DBA shop where you have duties divided up, maybe you have backup DBAs and tuning DBAs and such, this is a great paradigm to follow where you don't grant DBA to these people, you grant limited roles. If you're using database vault in 12CR2, we've added in still more capability to do separation of duties, particularly around two commands, alter system and alter session. If you look at the alter system command, that command is really overpowered. You can do all kinds of things with it. And if you're trying to design a separation of duties matrix, alter system is probably more than any one person needs to have. It would be great if you could have, well, this person can alter system set events, this person can alter system to recover a table space or to take something offline or to change the database from mount to open mode. But with grants, you can't do that. With database vault starting in 12CR2 for both alter system and alter session, we allow you to create command rules, not just at the command level, but for these two at the command argument level. So I can have one rule for alter session set event, another rule for alter database open, if you will. Connect is a special case here. One of the most common uses of database vault command rules over time has proven to be connect. And if you're working in a database vault environment, you may have found yourself writing case statements to handle the connect rule. Case user is Bob, then if they're from IP address XXXXXXX, we allow the login to happen. If they're not, we don't. Case the user is Mary, if she is running SQL Developer, we allow her to log in. If she's running Toad, we don't. And so very common to have complex command rules. And those can get pretty long and hard to read and hard to maintain. And they also introduce a lot of opportunity for error. Starting in 12CR2, we again allow you to set up command rules, not just at the connect command level, but at the user level for the connect. So you can just have a matrix where I'm going to connect as Bob, this is the rule for Bob, this is the rule for Mary, this is the rule for Jane, and then a default rule that handles everybody else. Again, separation of duties, you can get very fine-grained with this. Now, one of the wonderful things about Oracle, one of the things we love about Oracle is how flexible it is. There is so much you can do here. And I often get asked, what should we do? And, oops, sorry, didn't mean to hit that. What should we do? And the answer to that question is, it depends. One of my favorite customers, I love these guys. They use everything from Oracle. They're really, really smart, but they have 2 DBAs. And they have about 20 databases, and both the DBAs manage all the databases. Separation of duties for them doesn't really make a lot of sense. Now, they don't use SYSDBA, they use named accounts, but they don't have an infrastructure DBA and a junior DBA and a senior DBA. They each have one login in the database. And that's a good business practice for them because that's how their organization is set up. Another one of my favorite customers has 10,000 databases, actually a little bit more than that. And they have hundreds of DBAs. So they have like 20 people who are backup DBAs. They have about 25 people who are nothing but performance tuning. They have a bunch of DBAs that manage application data changes. And for them, fine-grained separation of duties makes a lot of sense because it reduces the opportunity for error and reduces their security risk. So you want to think about what does your environment look like, what makes sense in your organization before you implement any of these. There's a few other places to think in terms of separation of duties. We're often asked as product managers, how should I do this? How should I manage my organization? And one of the common things we get, especially around Key Vault, is who should own the keys for encryption? And it's one of those things, well, you know, I can't tell you who should own your stuff, but a very common pattern is to have the security team own or manage the keys and have the DBAs own and manage the databases. If you don't have a security team who can manage the keys for you, you might give the lead DBA management of the keys and everybody else just into the database. So you can set up separation of duties that way. Same thing with Database Vault. Very, very common we get when we're talking to customers who are implementing it is tell us what organizational pattern they should follow. Again, your organizational pattern is going to be what works within your organization, but a common pattern is to have the security team manage the rules and policies within Database Vault and what are the conditions under which DBAs can break those rules and policies, emergency login to change a password or something like that, and have the DBAs do the normal infrastructure management. So this is a form of separation of duties. Speaking of transparent data encryption, another common requirement for transparent data encryption is to separate out the ability to open or close the key store. And we can do this with Database Vault rule sets that look for things like, are there 2 people logged in? Many customers want to have 2-person integrity set up. Is it a certain time of day? Am I coming from a workstation that has keystroke logging turned on? There's lots of things you can do to lock down the ability to do key management operations. Okay. So we've hit a ton of things here, and you may say, well, how do I get started if I want to take a harder look at separation of duties and begin to use this in my organization? And one way to get started is not to go out and start doing and changing a bunch of stuff, but just to think about what your organization is like and what are your requirements. And I hate to say create a spreadsheet, but think about creating a spreadsheet and maybe just list, these are the people that I have working for me on the left-hand side. These are the accounts we use. And what in our organization should those accounts be doing? Be brutally honest when you do this, right? Because it's our nature to try and maybe increase our privileges a little bit, but what do I truly need to do my job? And then use the concepts we've talked about, the administrative privileges, SYSKM, SYSRAC, SysBackup, SysDG, the roles, creating separate roles, Database Vault realms, Database Vault command rules. Use those techniques to limit people to just what they need to do their job. Okay? The office of saying the same thing over and over again repetitively tells me to always close with a summary. So remember this, your database, we give you a ton of flexibility. just about any security requirement you can imagine can be modeled with the things that I've shown you today. Use the tools and techniques we've just discovered. Minimize your security risk and decrease the risk or the opportunity for human error. And with that, we'll end the technical session and we'll switch over to Q&A. Once again, any security topic is fair game. Do remember that we're recording this and remember that it's an open forum. But if you've got a question, now's the time to ask it. And Schumann asked, is there any way to prevent SQL injection using Database Vault? Not really. Well, yes and no. If you want to prevent SQL injection within a schema, no. If you want to prevent cross-schema SQL injection, yes. So suppose I'm going in doing a SQL injection attack and what I'm targeting is just getting more data out of the application than the application is supposed to give. Maybe I want to pull all rows or something like that. Because the application has privileges to see all rows, then I'm able to do that. But suppose instead what I'm trying to do is to go in and do privilege escalation and switch to another user. Database Vault can limit what a application can do. So even public privileges can be sealed off with Database Vault, and so it could prevent that. Our tool for preventing SQL injection really is the database firewall, part of Audit Vault and Firewall. And the way that we typically look at SQL injection is we want to look at an application, what SQL is that application normally allowed to execute, and then create a whitelist of that and only allow that. So Database Vault, again, executive summary, has some usage in preventing SQL injection, but that's not really what we designed it for. Good question.
Hey, Russ, this is Ravi here. I just wanted to clarify that 12202 contains NES 416 and not 415, as I mentioned. So
thank you, Ravi.
Update the slide.
Russ,
all right.
One of the things that would be nice, kind of those SYS roles,
Mm-hmm.
have something for the DBS and TP users when you're monitoring the database in a data guard environment when you're in an active passive type of configuration, since the secondary side is in mainly a read-only mode. You can't use your default account to monitor that database. You have to actually grant it SYSDBA to be able to monitor both sides.
You actually shouldn't need to do that anymore, Jim. You should be able to grant SysDG. Have you tried that?
We haven't got into 12.2 yet.
SysDG was 12.1.
Okay, we only got a couple 12.1s. We're still 99% of our environment is 11.
Yeah, for 11, you know, that was really before we started down this path of a little bit finer grain. But once you get to 12.1, you should be able to just grant this role. And if you look at what it's got all your $$ tables, your $V$ and $GV$ views, and it's got select any dictionary. That's all that's needed for DBS and MP.
Okay, that's good. Because that was always one of the issues I've been having. Is like, don't want to grant that.
But you know, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is why we did what we did in 12C. Exactly what you said, the fact that we don't want to have monitoring tools with SYSDBA privileges is why we created these lower privileged administrative roles. Sorry, administrative privileges. I got to break my habit of calling them roles.
Yeah, I like the chart breakdown on what each person or group of people need to do. Trying to implement that currently, but one of the biggest complaints I have is from, I'm a DBA, I need DBA privileges.
So again, It depends on your organization.
Yeah.
There are a lot of places where the DBA role has been, I'm not going to say dumbed down, but where there are so many databases being monitored or managed that DBAs have very narrow functions. You have a DBA whose whole job is backup and recovery. You have another DBA whose whole job is patching. And if that's the case, you don't need DBA.
Right. Oh, I agree with you there.
Or my nightmare DBA scenario, I'm the DBA in charge of creating users and managing passwords, and that's my job. Oh. That one would drive me nuts. All right, I'm going to leave the line open because the AskTOM session runs till the top of the hour. But if there aren't any more questions, you can feel free to drop off. And thank you for joining. Our next session is going to be August 9th. That's the second Thursday of August. And unless there is something really unusual that happens and we don't release 18C next week, our topic next month will be new security features in database 18C. Really looking forward to that one. There is so much in 18C. I can't wait to show it all to you.
So the key vault is just a bundle patch, not a new version.
The key vault is a bundle patch, but remember with key vault, much like with audit vault, every bundle patch brings incremental improvements in the actual product. So it's not just bug fixes. Those bundle patches improve your product. If you go back through some of the AskTOM recordings, we had SYCAT on. SYCAT, what was that, about two? Oh, we've lost SYCAT already. He was on about 2 or 3 months ago for AskTOM, and he did a session on Key Vault, and he went through bundle patch by bundle patch what has been done. It's amazing. And Jim, we're down to just a couple of people. Unless somebody objects, hang on, and I'll bring up what that roadmap looks like for Key Vault. So hopefully you're still seeing this. So when we first released Key Vault 12.2, I'm not going to start back with 12.1, that was back in February, and we've done a bunch of stuff from 12.1 to 12.2. Then we came out with bundle patches 1 through 3, and in each of those you can see we added in new capabilities. Okay, we get to bundle patch 4, we add in new endpoints that we support. We get to bundle patch 4, we do hybrid key management. We get to, wait a minute, where's 5, 6, and 7? Hang on. Gosh darn it, I thought I had 5 and 6 in here. So bundle patch 7 is the one we're waiting on now. That's the one that SYCAT and his team should have out this month. We expect that to have these things. As we keep moving on, there'll be more and more stuff. The next major release for Key Vault is release 18. And we're looking forward to that hopefully later this year. And SYCAT and his guys have a bunch of stuff built into 18. But every bundle patch brings new functionality. Same thing if we were looking at Audit Vault. Every single bundle patch brings something new for Audit Vault. This latest bundle patch, you may remember, I think we talked about this last month, brought the new data privacy reports with sensitive data integration between DBSAT and Enterprise Manager's sensitive data discovery.
Yeah, I haven't got those. I haven't had time to get those two to play together.
There is never enough time in the day. And, I've been at Oracle for a long time. I've been here for 20 years now, and I have never seen the pace of change as rapid as it is now. It seems like we're putting out new releases, new features so much faster than we used to. There was a time when I first started Oracle, I worked for Oracle University, and I used to teach the new features classes. This is back in Oracle 7. And those were always the best classes to teach because you would basically be saying, here's the stuff that's new in 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, and it would be a short list, and this is what we've done. And you would learn it, and then about 3 years later, you'd have to learn a new one, and about 3 years later, you'd learn a new one. And so it was a very, very easy job to do. It was interesting, but it was pretty easy. Now, we're doing new features a couple of times a year. It's different. And with the cloud stuff, the pace of change gets even more rapid as you start to move things into the cloud. They're doing, in some cases, new features, every month, every week. So
Yeah.
Really hard to stay on top. But that's why we do calls like this, so we can tell you about them. You see something you need, at least you know it's out there.